Alright, hello everyone, this is Sino, and I'm going to be doing a patch notes analysis for version 1.0.0.8 of Grim Dawn, of which the changelog, or patch notes, or whatever you want to call them, were just released today, maybe yesterday by the time this video goes live. Before I get into it, quick disclaimer, I am on 4 hours of sleep and have a headache, so I am bound to read some things incorrectly. I read through this. So with that out of the way, just letting you know I'm going to get some stuff on. Jump right in, because I was told to make this as short as possible. Main focus of this build was to introduce some great quality of life tech changes that have been sitting on our wish list for a long time, but there's a few other fun things to discover as well. Most notably, that Alkamos in the Steps of Torment and Shazul in the Bastion of Chaos now have legendary versions of their unique items on Elite and Ultimate difficulties. This means Shazul has a legendary two-handed mace, and Alkamos has a legendary two-handed scythe and 2 legendary rings. Alkamos does not have a legendary war sword, which is kind of disappointing, but whatever. And most of these are pretty good. The scythe is not so great, the rings are pretty okay, and the Shazul weapon is also pretty okay, I think. Weapon tooltips now display an attacks per second value instead of a speed tag. Example, fast, very slow, etc. This is very nice to have. It makes the items themselves more sensible when you look at them, and it makes comparing two items actually more feasible in terms of speed. Keep in mind that I guess it doesn't matter for this. No, it doesn't matter. Yeah, whatever. Keep in mind nothing. This is it. Alright, the character sheet now displays an attacks per second value modified by all speed bonuses and penalties. Basically like this, except after all of your +% attack speed and everything. Player resistances on the character sheet now show the resistance amount over maximum cap in their tooltips. So what this means is, if you have 95% fire resistance and your cap is 80% fire resistance, it will show in the tooltip when you hover over the resistance, it will show 80% and then in parentheses plus 15%, which is very cool. It lets you more accurately adjust properties of your character without having to sum up all of the individual resist values on all of your gear and stuff. I misspelled character here. Plus, skill augments will now be grayed out if the corresponding mastery is not selected. Basically, that means if you're using water, which is soldier and shaman, and you have a piece of gear that gives plus skills to, say, canister bomb and demolitionist, that plus skills will be grayed out, so that it's indicating that you can't use it, or rather that you won't benefit from it. Added maximum speed cap values to the attack, cast, move speed tooltips on the character sheet, so this information is available within the game for easy reference, rather than researched outside of the game. Again, the tooltips if you hover over particular values. I'm not sure if this is dynamic, or if it's been hard-coded in, meaning if a mod, for instance, changes the maximum speed cap of a particular stat, whether that tooltip will dynamically update or not. I don't know if that's the case. I would hope so. I'm going to skip over Crucible changes because they're pretty straightforward and not everyone has the Crucible, so I don't feel the need to go over it too much. Tech fixed a display issue with % attack speed on the character sheet that would result in different attack speed caps based on weapon type. This was a display issue only and had no impact on gameplay. I'm not sure what this is referring to, but my guess is that it's referring to a weird bug where if you were using two-handed ranged weapons, no matter how much % attack speed you had, the maximum value you could reach on the character sheet was 171% for whatever reason. But apparently that was only a display issue and not actually impactful in terms of gameplay. And that's now fixed. Added explosive strike and nightfall damage to character sheet, DPS, and damage per hit calculations for fire strike and shadow strike, respectively. Huh, interesting. I did not know about that. So, character sheet DPS is a little bit more accurate now, but not by much. Fixed Shaman's Torrent not working properly with ranged weapons. When 1.0.0.7 came out, if you were using a ranged weapon with Primal Strike and the modifier Torrent, the Chain Lightning from Torrent would spawn on the player and then chain to enemies, whereas in the past it would spawn on an enemy and then chain to surrounding enemies. So effectively you lost one target in 1.0.0.7, but that's been remedied in this patch, which is nice. Fixed an issue where weapon swapping would become stuck if the player was trapped while charging toward a target. I've never encountered that, but seems pretty straightforward. Fixed a game hitch that was occurring with plus skill augment items. It is believed that this is referring to a particular modding bug, but it is unknown whether that is the case. Bandit forges and other quest-related destructibles are no longer destroyable by enemies. Thank God. Fixed an instance where client's components could become desynchronized with the host. I have no idea what that entails. Fixed equipment with illusions, which are the things that Corey the Keeper gives you. Fixed equipment with illusions using the Vaughn texture after the player was frozen or petrified. I don't know how many of you ran into this, but 9tricks ran into it several times while running Steps of Torment on his stream, so that issue is now fixed. Fixed another instance where the displayed pet pause in a multiplayer game would not be properly removed. There was a kind of minor bug report on the forums about this. Had no impact on gameplay really, but it was kind of a nuisance. Fixed damage absorption not showing up properly on skills with no skill points in them. Again, no gameplay impact with this bug, but a user interface adjustment. Game. Fixed an issue with Steps of Torment achievements involving Alcamos, in that slaying Alcamos would not give you any achievements, for whatever reason. Fixed an issue with a bounty for the outcast targeting Alcamos being impossible to complete. This may cause your bounty for the outcast to be set. I assume it's the same issue here, up here. That's now fixed as a result. Corey the Keeper now offers an item that allows you to remove an applied illusion. That's pretty cool. Slightly reduced Nemesis boss offensive ability and slightly reduced physical damage dealt by monsters on ultimate difficulty. This seems like adjustments to the 1.0.0.7 patch that kind of threw everything out of whack, for some people. Volver merchants no longer have an unusually high ratio for purchasing items from players. They used to purchase stuff from players for around, I have to do the math, maybe 30% more than anyone else, and that is no longer the case. Slightly increased percent energy regeneration gained from spirit. It was 0.25% and it's now 0.26% energy regeneration per point of spirit. Assuming I'm doing the math correctly, that means you have 3% more spirit, or no, 3% more energy regeneration from spirit on a character not focusing on spirit, such as most melee characters, and just going for around 320 spirit to equip endgame jewelry. And that doesn't sound like a lot, and it isn't a lot, but it is noticeable. It can be like 1 more point of energy regeneration per second, which isn't bad. That's pretty nice to have. Does it make spirit as good as physique? No, it does not. Devotion shrines now have a much higher chance of generating rare items rather than white or magic items, particularly on elite and ultimate difficulties. Increased chance of generating rare items from treasure troves and one-shot chests, particularly on elite and ultimate difficulties. Meaning, playing self-found is now just that much more viable. Thank goodness. I'm going to take a drink of water before I go into itemization. because there's a lot to talk about here. Alright. Okay. Itemization. Auras granted by components have been converted to self-buffs. This was done in response to the rare issues reported in regards to those auras killing players in multiplayer, particularly in hardcore mode. Well, this is not an ideal solution. Unfortunately, this issue has eluded us for far too long, to the detriment of the players. Our programmers had spent As this change is detrimental to pet builds, these skills now also give pet bonuses. Should this bug persist with other auras granted by items, we will take similar action on them in a future update, which, to my knowledge, it does not affect other auras. So there was some outcry to this change, most of which I find kind of silly, and fairly short-sighted, but to clarify some things about what this means. This is referring only to components with auras, such as, I don't know, purified salt or imbued silver, the weapon-based components. So it applies only to those. It doesn't apply to any other auras from gear or from mastery skills or any of that. The pet bonuses on the now self-buffs are identical to the buffs that you, the player, receives. So as far as pets are concerned, it functions exactly the same. In fact, it's a little bit better, because previously if pets went outside the range of your aura, they would lose the benefits, and now they just permanently have the benefits always when you're using the self-buff. So it's actually a little bit situationally better for pet builds. The only impact that this change has is in multiplayer, and that impact is that you can no longer, give resistances or a little bit of damage to your allies. But at the same time, you can no longer accidentally deal 4,000 damage a second to all of your allies for no apparent reason and kill them in hardcore. And frankly, to me, that feels like a very worthwhile trade. There's, outcry about this change. I honestly cannot bring it, I really cannot understand how this change is viewed as particularly negative when the alternative, which, probably the only alternative to this would be just delete the auras, or, suffer from players accidentally killing each other unintentionally. When that's the alternative, this is pretty preferable, in my opinion. So yeah, I think this is an amazing change. I think it's great. Obviously it's not perfect. Fixing the bug itself would have been perfect, but the amount of time and effort that Crate was putting into fixing this bug, and just coming up short with narrowing it down and actually fixing it, is time and effort taken away from developing new content. And to continue that, perhaps fruitlessly forever, just doesn't feel worthwhile. And so this change, I feel, is most definitely the best course of action. For those that are curious, this was a bug that was originally in the Titan Quest engine, which, I don't know when it was first discovered, but Titan Quest was released in 2006. So in theory, this bug has existed for 11 years, or so, give or take a couple months, and it just hasn't been able to be fixed. So, a little bit of a circumvention, hacky solution, but a solution nonetheless, and it's a good one, I feel. A pass has been done on magical affix drop tables to remove less desirable affixes from the loot pool in order to improve loot quality while leveling. As most of those affixes were already disabled at higher levels, 50+, this will have little to no impact at max level. This change is not retroactive. If you already have an item with one of these affixes, it will remain unchanged. So, I have no idea what to make of this because I haven't really noticed. And the fact that the I mean, I don't know which affixes this applies to, so I don't really know how to interpret this. But the fact that it explicitly means that some affixes don't show up at level cap means things like of spellweaving, or mighty, or shrewd, or those really crappy affixes that you always get on your monster infrequents, you're still going to get them, which blows. So this change, I haven't noticed it in practice, and it doesn't seem like it actually makes a difference to anyone in particular, but in theory, maybe it makes leveling somewhat better? I don't know. Fixed an issue that caused certain rare affixes to not be generated on various two-handed weapons. No idea what that's referring to. Reduced percent weapon damage on most item skill parts. I'm going to get back to that a little later. Legendary Agony. Reduced percent poison resist reduction to minus 15% on the skill part, but increased its damage. I don't want to look it up, but I believe it was originally minus 20% on the part. I don't know. Arcane Harmony leggings. Increased defensive ability to 80. I also don't know what it was originally. Avatar of Mercy. Increased cooldown on the skill part to 70 seconds. I believe it was 40 seconds? That sounds about right. Is it? There's definitely 40 somewhere on the Avatar of Mercy. It might be defensive ability, though. No, I don't know. Bone Weave leggings. I'm going to read through all of these, give some cursory thoughts, and then for particularly controversial stuff, I'm going to sum it up at the end, by the way. Bone Weave leggings added 25 defensive ability. Doesn't really matter. Chelsea of Barbaros added 18 defensive ability, doesn't really matter. On the skill part, reduced duration to 10 seconds, reduced cooldown to 15 seconds, increased percent all damage to 75%, added 15% armor bonus. These are potentially very good leads now. They have a good amount of offensive ability on them. They have physical resist. They have the highest possible base armor that you can have in the lead slot. And the skill part has a lot more uptime and better stats all around. Much better stats, actually. So these are potentially very, very strong. They also give you +3 to Olorin's Rage, which is more offensive ability, and somewhat more movement speed. So potentially very good legendary lead plates. Demon Bone lead plates added 25 defense ability, doesn't matter. Devil's Cage Halbert removed percent resist reduction on skill proc, but increased its damage, reduced cooldown to 6 seconds and duration to 4 seconds, added defensive ability reduction. It wasn't good before. I'm going to hazard a guess and say that it still isn't good. Although, having only 2-second downtime on a proc that ensnares and deals a bit of damage and now applies defensive ability reduction, having a 2-second downtime on that, I think it's 100% chance on hit. So you just get tapped and then everything around you gets ensnared. It's maybe not terrible. I don't know. Dracaris added 12% cast speed on the skill proc, increased duration to 15 seconds, reduced cooldown to 12 seconds, which means 100% uptime. That's cool. Increased percent chaos fire damage bonuses to 125% for the player. If I'm not mistaken, the skill proc is a chance on enemy death proc. I believe it's 25% chance, maybe 20%. The issue is that it's some weird kind of pet item, but the only sort of build for which I could see this being used is on a Chaos Aether Ray build. And yet we have the Black Flame set, so I don't see this change making this item be used at all. Essence of the Grim Dawn reduced cooldown on skill proc to 8 seconds. I believe it has a 5-second form of crowd control. Or maybe I'm getting my... I always get this amulet mixed up with something else. So, it could be pretty good. I know it does a lot of damage, so lower cooldown could be pretty nice. Footpads of the Grey Magi, increased defensive ability to 58. No, still not too good. Most of the legendary feat suck because they don't give you a lot of movement speed. Golemborn Greaves, it lost 100 armor on the skill proc, still amazing. Gut Ripper, reduced defensive ability reduction to 80 on the skill proc, added a 0.5 second cooldown. I mean, the cooldown kind of blows. I don't think the DA reduction matters. Hellborn increased cooldown on Wave of Fire to 1.5 seconds. Whatever. Herald of Blazing Ends. Increased burn damage on skill proc. Herald is the mace, right? And the skill proc is a meteor. Yeah, I always felt the burn damage on that proc was actually a little too low. Still, it feels better as a fire damage rather than burn damage item. So I don't know. Estrandra's Unity set added 50 defense ability bonus, reduced % physical resist bonus to 16%. It was 20%, which was absurd. And 16% is still absurd in my opinion. Estrandra's Pauldrons added 130 health, which that set did not need, seeing as how the chest could already roll with 900, maybe even 1,000 health. So the set did not need additional health whatsoever. Mark of Divinity increased cooldown on skill proc to 120 seconds. There's a lot of controversy about this. I don't like it either. I don't think it's as significant a change as people are making it out to be. It was 90 seconds beforehand, so it's 30 seconds longer, which is a 33% increase in cooldown. Which is a lot. But I don't think it really matters. It matters in a couple ways, which I'm going to get to when I go through all of this, but people are making this out to be some build killing change. It isn't. It's basically the same item and it functions the same way. You just need to survive 30 seconds longer. Mark of the Apostate reduced cooldown on skill proc to 3 seconds. The item still sucks. Markovian's Fortress set reduced physical damage bonus to 18 to 28. Reduced cooldown reduction from proc to 1 second and reduced its cooldown to 4 seconds. The cooldown reduction and the cooldown I have not played with, because in testing it was something different. In testing, I believe they left the cooldown reduction as it was and simply upped the cooldown to 5 seconds from 4.5 seconds. So I have no idea how this behaves now. I really don't know, actually. The broken thing about the Markovian's Fortress set was its interaction with, mostly with Blitz, which is a 3.8 second cooldown. And previously, you could reduce that by 2 seconds flat. Down to 1.8 seconds, and then you had a little bit of cooldown reduction on the helmet, so it was a little bit less. And Blitz does a lot of damage, so that was kind of the broken part about the Fortress set. I think this is fine. I don't think it breaks the set or makes it unusable. I think it just makes it not absurd. Markovian's Bulwark and Markovian's Distinction reduced % max pierce resist. Doesn't matter, because you still get a crapload of max pierce resist on the set. Nidala's Legs removed % poison resist reduction on the skill proc, but increased its damage and added minus 15% speed reduction. I assume that's an additive change, meaning enemies can't resist it, which could be pretty powerful. Sash of the Immortal Sage, increased cooldown on Wave of Fire to 1.5 seconds. For no reason does the item sucks. I mean, it sucks, but it sees a little bit of use, so I guess it's not as bad as some other stuff up here. Shroud of Dread set, Steel Part now also grants 15% crit damage. Doesn't matter. Black Gem of Dread added 8% crit damage, increased speed of the Gaze of Dread summons, cooldown reduced to 2.5 seconds. If it means speed as in like, you know, cast speed, attack speed, movement speed, like total speed, then that could be pretty okay. Otherwise, The whole set as a whole was pretty lackluster. Mantle of Dread added some much needed resists, but not enough. Reign of the Black Matriarch, Steel Part now has a 0.5 second cooldown. This is, clearly a nerf, but frankly I kind of like this, because it means if you cast Curse of Frailty on something, you no longer just randomly proc it on a whole bunch of random trap that you're not presently fighting. You can now, it favors you like proccing this on a particular target that you are actively fighting, and you can still proc it like 20 times in a very short span of time, especially if you have 2 of the rings, because the cooldown doesn't stack. So it's still as good as it was, it just favors you playing a little bit smarter, which I think is better in the grand scheme of things. Siegebreaker reduced % max pierce resist to 3%, still an amazing shield. Storm Cage Lead Guards increased defense ability to 25, still sucks. Tinker's Ingenuity removed % damage absorption bonus from the skill proc. I did not know that was a thing. That sucks. That did not need to happen. For the most part, I think, people are saying items are being nerfed into obscurity, and for the most part, I think those people are wrong. This might nerf Tinker's Ingenuity into obscurity. It's still, the other highlight of the item, besides the proc, was the very, very high, if I'm correct, bleed and poison and acid resistance, as well as the plus max resistance to those 2 stats. So now it really only has those that are appealing, and the rest is pretty lackluster. And now the proc is worse. So this item, if you're not hurting for poison and acid resistance, you will never consider this item, which I think kind of blows. The Death March set. Increased cold resist reduction on granted steel to -15%, it was -10%. Alright, a little bit better for cold, and cold most certainly needs it. The Northern Worm added frostburn damage to the steel proc, still sucks. The Venom Blade Pact, steel proc now has a 0.5 second cooldown. I don't even remember what its proc is from the full set. And I don't want to look it up because I have a whole setup here that I don't want to mess around with. I don't really care because the set was amazing, and I don't think a 0.5 second cooldown on a single proc is going to ruin that. The Untouchable reduced % DA bonus on skill proc to 8%. Now, some of my friends were complaining about this being completely gutted. No, it's fine. I thought they removed this. No, it's still here. It's fine. It was 10%, so that's barely any change whatsoever. It's still a decent shield if you don't want to take damage, but also don't want to kill stuff. Thornhide Lead Guards. Increased defense ability to 36. Still sucks. Orzone's Avatar set. Increased % attack speed bonus to 18%. Heart of Orzhov added 224 health. Orzone's Flame Spreader increased OA to 75, added 120 health. So the set gets about 340 more health and has more attack speed and has more offensive ability. Still sucks. Valdun's Rifle added 20% chaos resist. That won't go unnoticed. Venom Spine Greaves added 33 defense ability. Still sucks because it's a legendary Vernom Spine. Who the hell typed this? Still sucks because it gives you no movement speed. Vile Blood Mantle on the steel part, removed percent, bleed resist reduction, increased damage out, chance to confuse to 33% for 2 seconds, and reduced cooldown to 2 seconds. Okay, big breath in. There's a lot of complaining about the removal of the bleed resist reduction. There's still a lot of ways to reduce bleed resist though, so I don't think this especially matters. You still have 50% on Devouring Swarm. You have... What is it? Is it another 50% on Curse of Frailty? You have Rend, which I have no idea what it is. You can still have a lot of bleed resist reduction if you want to, so I don't see this as being too much of an issue. Voidwalker footpads, added 25 DA, still sucks. I don't even think they give you any movement speed. Warborn set, increased cooldown on steel part to 7 seconds and duration to 10 seconds. Mostly just means that the intermittent heal that you receive on attack happens less frequently. Or more infrequently. I don't know, one of those two. Wild Shorn Lead Guards, increased defensibility to 56. It's okay, I guess. Wouldn't overtake a Dreed set. Or Soleil set. No, not Soleil set. Is Dreed set the only one that gives you pet bonuses? I think it is. Wouldn't overtake a good Dreed set lead piece, but for pets, this is maybe okay now. I mean, it was already like kind of your only other alternative, so it's a little bit better. Yay. Wraithborn Lead Wraps added 18 DA, still suck. Wormstale Foot Guards added 20 DA, still mostly suck. Zohan's Revenge reduced percent max pierce resist to 3%. In the face of the Markovian Shield and Siegebreaker, this item is still never going to get used. It needs more than it has. Black Starved Deceit reduced resist reduction on steel part to 15, highly necessary. Empowered Warp Shard reduced percent damage converted to health to 10%, mostly necessary. Ravna's Guard reduced max pierce resist. Warp Shard reduced damage converted to health. Spell Weaving. This one's interesting. Bonuses increased to match single element magic suffixes. Spell Weaving suffixes are now effectively superior versions of the single element magic suffixes. Which means Spell Weaving is technically 2 single element magic suffixes in one. Same bonuses in terms of the magnitude of the values. So Spell Weaving is a little bit better. You still don't want to see it. The suffix Insanity removed chance to convert enemies. People were complaining about this, but it wasn't really that good for the players, but in the hands of enemies they could convert your pets, and that's not really something you want to have happen. So that feels actually like a buff to players, honestly. It's a buff to pet builds, at the very least. Bernothian Carnage reduced cooldown reduction from part to 4 seconds, but the cooldown itself is unchanged, I guess. Unlike Markovian's Fortress. Manio's Bastion reduced percent damage absorption to 15%, replaced percent physical resist with 30% armor. I never thought this was all that great. Now they're nerfing it. Although that's a lot of percent armor. I don't know, I never liked this item. I buffed the hell out of it in Cornucopia. I don't really like this item all that much, so I don't see the need for that. Nemesis added 9 cold damage. Nemesis pet now deals pierce and cold damage rather than physical and bleed. Oh, okay. So they added 9 cold damage to the base relic. The pet that you can summon now deals pierce and cold rather than physical and bleed. Its damage has been increased. And its attacks have a chance to reduce defensibility. So that's pretty cool. I have heard through the grapevine that it still sucks. Haven't actually tested it myself. Reduced percent weapon damage on steel part to 20%. Pretty necessary. Reckoning, though that was on Orleans Wrath. Again, I'm tired, sorry. Reckoning, reduced percent physical resist reduction on steel part to -10%. I didn't think it was necessary, because, well, maybe it was necessary, I don't know. I don't know what the flavor of the month Witchblade build is using for Relic. But still, of course, one build shouldn't dictate the balance of any particular item in respect to others. So I don't know, I still feel as though this isn't necessary, but whatever. Torment, reduced percent physical resist reduction on the steel part to -10%. I mean, you may as well just delete it on Torment. Torment is not a physical damage relic. I don't even know why that stat exists there. I believe it's like an Aether Vitality relic. So why does it reduce physical resist? We don't know. Ozon's Pyroclasm, reduced percent weapon damage on steel part to 8%. Those are already pretty bad. Pyroclasm is the 3 lines, right? Okay, so it wasn't bad, but I was getting it confused with the meteor. So it wasn't bad, but the percent weapon damage wasn't great either. I don't know, I don't see this as being necessary. I don't think dual-wield pistols was particularly overpowered, and I bring that up because pyromancers with 2 pistols were basically the only people using this relic that I'm aware of. And I didn't feel as though this aspect of them was all that overpowered, so I don't see the need for this, and it just makes the relic that much more unlikely to be picked up by anyone else. Component added 10% of physical, dealt as vitality, reduced damage converted to health on the skill to 24%. Some people were complaining about this because everyone's using it on their Witchblades or Commandos or what have you, their physical based characters for the lifesteal, ignoring the flat vitality on the item. And some people were complaining that there's already a component, Hollowed Fang, that converts physical to vitality, so why do we need another one? Well, if you look at components, you realize there is in fact usually 2 to 3 or more components that convert physical into any particular damage type. And to my knowledge, Vitality was the only one that had 1 component in Hollowed Fang that did this. So now Haunted Steel does it too. So this isn't intended to be a nerf to physical builds. It just so happens that literally every physical build in existence was using this. It's supposed to be a buff to Vitality builds, particularly Vitality auto-attackers, which did kind of need the buff. Hollowed Fang, reduced percent damage converted to health on Blood Drinkers, skill to 20%. I assume that's because it was originally 24% and they want this skill to be better than it. Seeing as how this is the kind of higher up version. Resilient Plating, increased DA to 26 and percent pierce resist to 15%. I've actually had a couple occasions where I was considering using Resilient Plating. I wonder if I may actually finally use it now. Restless Remains, increased energy bonus to 220, insignificant. Chance of current life retaliation to 20%, chance of 8% damage, also insignificant. Void Touched Ammo, increased projectile radius on Chaos Bolts to 1.2 meters, slightly increased damage. I guess, whatever. Sure. I still don't think the skill was going to be usable in Ultimate, and it was already fine in normal Veteran, so Now maybe it's usable in Elite, who knows. Lifestealer Oil, reduced percent damage converted to health to 8%, added 50% life leech damage bonus. Alright, whatever. Oh, that's a lot of devotion. Alright. Affliction, increased DA by 8. Whatever. Hamatok, Spirit of the Winter, increased health by 40%, Frostburn by 50%, and percent cold damage by 50%. Added 30 DA. Makes Chosen's builds a little bit better. That's pretty cool. They were already pretty okay, so, but you know, the more defensive ability, that's nice. Anvil increased defensive ability by 5, whatever. Berserker increased percent physical damage bonus by 30%, increased percent pass resist to 15%, removed percent damage converted to health bonus. Utterly terrible change. Berserker was not seeing much use in the previous patch for a couple reasons. Namely, because most legendary axes are pretty terrible. Especially the physical legendary axes, of which there's basically only Earth Shatter, right? No, Earth Splitter is the name of it. This is the physical legendary axe. And Berserker is an axe-only constellation. So there wasn't really good itemization support to use this constellation. And now they made it worse by removing the percent damage converted to health. So I don't really think that was a wise choice here. At least not with the itemization system that we have. Maybe it could do, if they want to go this route, maybe they could give it some either movement speed or attack speed, not both, one or the other. Maybe they could do that to make this constellation stand out, but otherwise it's just a pretty terrible constellation in terms of the bonuses that it gives you. Blades of Nadan reduced percent attack speed by 2%. Really, really insignificant change. I have no idea whether this is warranted or not. I mean, I've used the constellation, it's powerful. This nerf just feels so insignificant that, like, it's so small that I don't actually know whether it was something worth doing. I mean, sure, Blade Masters or whatever, probably a little bit strong, so here's a little place to tune them down, I guess. Blind Sage added 25 DA, increased percent burn, fast burn, and electrocute damage to 200%. I still think the constellation is complete and utter ass. Crab increased DA by 17. That's an odd value. I was almost considering picking Crab the other day. I don't think this is going to make me change my mind. I think the constellation just needs more. The other values on the constellation, including the value on the steel part, needs to be a little bit higher in order to pique my interest. This is a step in the right direction, certainly. Dire Bear added 40 armor, removed percent attack speed bonus. I think that's fine. The 40 armor is pretty good. The removal of the percent attack speed bonus seems significant, but as I recall, it's only 5% attack speed, and this constellation is best with two-handed weapons, and 5% attack speed and two-handed weapons, that's really insignificant. With melee weapons, the percent attack speed was likely overperforming on the constellation, and that because the constellation already gave you good percent damage and some very good defenses, and now it gives you 40 armor, so this feels like a fair trade to me. Dying God added 25 defensive ability, that's pretty cool. Kind of a lot of my characters will like that change, actually. Eel increased defensive ability by 7. Probably not noticeable in a vacuum on its own, but in conjunction with other things, because Eo is a fairly popular constellation. In conjunction with other constellations, this is, you know, one piece of many that likely contributes to more defensive ability for a build. Noticeably more defensive ability for a build. Fox reduced bleed damage by 7 for 3 seconds. There's way too much math there for me to interpret that change on this little sleep. Gallows increased health by 45. What was it before? Like a total of 80 health, so now it's 125 health, if I'm not mistaken. It's not bad. Actually makes it pretty decent as a first pick constellation when you're getting your first devotion points if you're going a vitality or chaos build. Where my Ghoul added 23 defense ability, the constellation still sucks. Guardian's Gaze, 8% vitality resist. Guardian's Gaze is the Chaos Poison Acid Dreed Orbital. Alright, sure, whatever. Harpy added 1.5 energy regeneration. Ooh, I like that. I take Harpy a lot. I know other people don't, but I do, so this is a good buff to me. I like that. Harvestman Scythe added 2% defensive ability. Again, Harvestman Scythe, I mentioned this in my last patch notes analysis. It's a constellation that has been continually receiving bonus after bonus after bonus. And it's really, really appealing. The problem with it is that its requirements are just not meta enough, I suppose, for people to pick it. So I guess it's kind of a neat curiosity of how good do you have to make this constellation before someone just decides to start picking it, and then everyone else decides to start picking it. How good does this constellation have to be? Because it is already very good. So my advice, start using it. Huntress added 10 cunning and increased, unless you want to wait for it to get even better if no one continues to use it except for me. Huntress added 10 cunning and increased offensive ability by 15, reduced bleed damage to 10 over 3 seconds. Sure, whatever. Increased percent all damage by 25%, increased, this is Hydra. All damage by 25%, increased percent offense ability to 4%, increased offense ability by 10. I still haven't found it too appealing on the builds that I've been using. It's certainly a buff to pyromancers that are absolutely using this. Also kind of a slight buff to the Valdun set. Other than that, I don't really see much of a use for this constellation in the grand scheme of things. Imp added 10 defensive ability. Kind of the same deal with Eeyore. Just one of those things that will help contribute you to being a little bit more tankier. Jackal added 6% gas speed. Nice. That's actually huge. Jackal is pretty amazing as it is. It's basically a smaller, more offensive version of Harvestman Scythe. Leviathan increased DA by 14. Whatever. Light of Empyrean added 30 DA. That's not insignificant. But the rest of the constellation still sucks. Magi added 20 DA, increased burn damage by 60%. Could be pretty decent. Magi is a constellation that already sees a lot of use. Could be pretty good. Manticore increased OA by 10. Decent. For Dragon the Wolf, this is a tier 3 skill that I have never used because it looks awful. Added 30 DA, reduced bleed damage to 18 over 3 seconds. Still looks awful to me. Oak Lines, whatever the hell's Lantern, added 20 DA. Pretty nice. I use this constellation a lot as well. I'm sure my characters will appreciate that. Olwyn reduced physical damage to 9 to 12. Pretty small change. Owl added 15 DA, increased percent burn, fast burn, and electrocute to 50%. What was it before? 35%? Maybe 40%. 40% seems high. Panther increased percent energy regeneration to 15% from 10%. It's not bad. Revenant added 100 health and 6% cast speed, increased percent vitality, resist to 24%. Revenant is looking really, really good nowadays. Bowan's Scepter increased DA by 11. Whatever. Sailor's Guide added 8 DA. Definitely did not need it. Scholar's Light added 8 DA, increased energy regeneration to 2.2. Which one is Scholar's Light? Isn't that the one that already gives you, like, 25 DA and then 3% DA? Or am I getting that wrong? Which one is Scholar's Light? Hold on a moment. Oh. Oh, no, this is the, Meteor Shower one, right? Okay, whatever. I mean, 8 DA on a tier 3 constellation, pretty bad. And 2.2 energy regeneration on a tier 3 constellation. Okay. Soleil's Witchblade added 10 DA, whatever. Spider increased DA by 5, increased percent cast speed to 5%. Yeah, whatever. Sure, I guess Spider's pretty okay, so now it's more pretty okay. Tartar the Builder increased DA by 5, no one cares. Just Tartar the Builder gives you 1,000 health. Who cares about defense ability when you have another 1,000 health? Tsunami added 10 DA. Sure. Turtle increased DA by 8. Sure. Unknown Soldier increased health to 20, reduced pierce damage to 10, removed attack damage converted to health. I didn't actually know this bonus existed. I mean, like today I didn't know, and then a couple hours ago one of my friends told me that it did. So this, like, I was under the impression that it didn't exist, and now it doesn't, so, you know, sure, whatever, I think the Constellation is still fine. I took it not knowing that this bonus ever existed, not noticing its impact whatsoever, so, sure, whatever. More health, less pierce damage, that's all the change means to me, and that's a trade I'm willing to make. Wolverine increased DA by 7. Still sucks. Acid Spray reduced resistance reduction to 25. Ugh, terrible change. We'll go into why. Blizzard slightly increased damage, not enough to make it good. Assassin's Mark reduced defensive... no, whoa, okay. Reduced resistance reduction to minus 28% additive from minus 30%. Was it 30% or was it 33%? Whatever, it's still fine. If you were using it before, you're still going to use it, and it's still going to be great. Blade Burst, reduced percent weapon damage to 18%. Blind Fury, reduced percent weapon damage to 60%. Bull Rush, reduced percent weapon damage to 28%. Sure, whatever. Elemental Seeker, I'll go into these because I don't like them, but I don't want to talk about why quite yet. We still have a little bit ways to go. Elemental Seeker. Seekers now last a short duration before exploding. Their ambient damage has been increased to compensate for the reduced duration. Sure. I don't know. I think the Constellation sucks. I've never ever used Elemental Seeker, so whatever. Can't speak to that. Falcon Swoop. Sorry, I have the hiccups. Reduced percent weapon damage to 20%. This one was absolutely deserved. Falcon Swoop cannot be nerfed enough. Fisher slightly increased damage. Chance to stun now scales with rank to 25%. A buff to a skill that did not need a buff. Guardian's Days increased chaos damage. That's interesting. I have a chaos variant of this proc on one of my builds. I wonder how much they improved it by. So sure, I'll take this. Gladly. Ghoulish Hunger now activates at 45%. This may cause your skill assignment to reset for the celestial power. Previously it activated at 33%, which was utter garbage. Now it activates at 45%, which is utter garbage. Lighter Empyrean. Fuck. Now applies a percent damage reduction debuff instead of reducing armor. Much, much better. Still not going to be used. Mark of the Wendigo. Reduced percent damage converted to health to 75%. I believe it was 80%, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe 90%. Maul. Reduced percent weapon damage to 50%. I think it was 90% beforehand. This belongs with these in that I don't like it, but I'll talk about it later. Meteor Shower. Thermite Mines can no longer be assigned to this part. Slightly increased damage. This may cause your skill assignment to reset for the celestial power. I didn't think Thermite Mines with Meteor Shower was all that powerful. What I did think was Thermite Mines with Meteor Shower sucked in multiplayer because everyone would lag the hell out of the game. It was terrible to play with and be in the vicinity of. So I don't, from a balancing perspective, I don't think this was necessary. From actually playing the game perspective, thank God this was changed. Raise the Dead. What a long one. Pet duration increased to 40 seconds by match strength. Skeletons now deal Aether and Vitality damage and scale with player bonuses rather than scaling with pet bonuses. This part has always been a bit of a niche, but as other options already exist via itemization for more hybrid pet summoning builds, it seemed better to focus Phase the Dead to be an option for direct damage builds that like the idea of having pets around, but not necessarily excel at them. Damage may require further refinement, but the skeletons are now harder to kill, move faster, and last longer. Okay. I haven't really noticed an improvement. Granted, the majority of the builds that I'm using them on do not scale Aether or Vitality damage, so that could be a slight factor. But I haven't really noticed an improvement with it. I've taken it on a couple of builds, mostly for the affinity, from getting +1 Chaos affinity from maxing out Revenant. So I've used it in passing. I mean, cool, you have some skeleton followers. They don't really do much. They kind of just walk around. They're still not fast enough. In my opinion, at least. They don't attack fast enough. They don't walk fast enough. Meaning they don't reach enemies fast enough. And if they do reach enemies fast enough, they maybe get one attack off and then you slay them. You slay the enemy in like one shot. So they don't really make an impact on anything. They're kind of just there. But whatever. They're obviously trying to improve it, so sure, I'll let Crate do whatever they want to this skill. Rend, reduced resistance reduction to -28%, matching that of Assassin's Mark. Very necessary. Scorpion Stain, reduced defensive ability reduction to 130. I don't really think this part was overperforming, but sure, whatever. Targo's Hammer, reduced % weapon damage to 35%, increased % trauma damage, and flat physical damage, added 0.1 second cooldown. People are complaining about this. This is a 41% reduction additive from its previous % weapon damage of 76%, if I'm not mistaken. Which is kind of a lot at first thought, but when you actually think about it, this isn't a huge change. The reason it isn't a huge change is because Targo's Hammer requires you to block, meaning you have to be using a shield, meaning you only have one weapon, meaning you don't actually have all that much % weapon damage anyways, and the brunt of the damage that Targo's Hammer does is in the flat damage, which was improved. So this sort of change, it's drastic. It's more than 41% weapon damage gone. More than half of its % weapon damage is gone. That was not close to the main source of damage coming from this skill, and now this skill is much better with conversion. So really, there's so many people complaining about this. I think this is a buff. I legitimately think that this is a buff to the skill. Obviously this is a nerf, because this means if you have 100% block recovery, you're using Overguard or whatever, and 100% block chance, you're not just going to fire off hammers everywhere. You have 0.1 seconds to wait between hammers can start circling around you. Obviously that's a nerf, but it's a nerf to one subset of a way to design a shield character. Like, it doesn't really nerf characters that aren't a soldier. Because to my knowledge, you can't reach 100% block recovery or 100% block chance if you're not soldier, which is a conversation unto itself, and I'm not saying that that's a good thing that you can't do that, because I don't think it's a good thing that you can't do that, but right now this only affects shield soldiers, this particular cooldown thing. So yes, nerf, this is a nerf. This is a buff for the most part. The only way this is not a buff is that this now applies weapon damage effects to less extent, which means lifesteal, Mark of Greed, resist reduction if you were using that, damage reduction if you had any of that, is now less effective when applied through Targo's Hammer. I think lifesteal is really the only one for which that's a major impact, but still should be pretty good given the damage that Targo's Hammer still allows you to do. and the number of hammers you're still allowed to have out at one time, lifesteal should still be pretty powerful when combined with Tondro's hammer. So yeah, I think as a whole, this is a buff. And everyone is crying out that it's a nerf. I think it's a buff. It's a buff to so many different builds, and if it's a nerf to only a select few subset pieces of builds. So I think that's fine, honestly. Trample, reduce percent weapon damage to 50%. Stupid change, along with, these. We'll get to those. Soldier. Oh boy. Deadly momentum. Added internal trauma damage. Slightly reduced flat physical damage scaling with rank. But, decorated... wait, no. Hold on. But, Maneir's Bulwark. Reduced physical damage scaling with rank. Reduced percent life damage reduction to 33% by rank 12. 45% max ultimate rank. But, shield training. Removed physical damage bonus. So, reduced flat physical, reduced flat physical, removed flat physical, suddenly a loss of tons of flat physical damage. Or is it? I did the math in this thread or in the Cadence Commando shield thread. I don't know where I did this math. But, essentially, assuming you do no flat physical damage outside of Deadly Momentum, Maneir's Bulwark, and Shield Training, meaning your Cadence actually does 0 flat physical damage, which is not the case. The sum of these changes, if you bring these skills up to maximum ultimate rank, where the change is most significant, some of these, on average, come to an 11% nerf to your damage. That sounds like a lot. But our assumptions with that 11% is that this is the only source of your damage. You have all 3 of these skills at maximum ultimate rank, and that's literally it. That's your entire build. You're using your fists, basically. You don't even have a weapon equipped. Cadence is doing no damage for whatever reason. You just have this. That's not really a real situation. In reality, doing the math, which I did, this is a 3 to 4% nerf to your damage output. Which, if you have 100,000 damage per second, which the Cadence Commando Shield build thing, whatever, had, you lose 3,000 damage. You still deal 97,000 damage per second. Still seems pretty good to me, if you ask me. Still seems completely overpowered, if you ask me, and deserving of more potent nerfs, if you ask me. Okay, Decorated Soldier. Slightly increased percent physical damage scaling at ultimate ranks. Doesn't matter. Decorated Soldier is so bad. Military Conditioning. Reduced percent health bonus at ultimate ranks to 25% by max ultimate rank. Kinda blows. Again, it's only in ultimate ranks, which I haven't actually had this skill in ultimate ranks in a long time. But it sucks that it's getting nerfed, because I feel as though it's been fine. Overguard, increased cooldown to 20 seconds, reduced shield damage blocked, scaling at ultimate ranks to 235% by max ultimate rank. Again, of course, people are complaining about this. The way I look at this, so yeah, it's a nerf, there's no debating that. What does this nerf do? It reduces the damage that you block at ultimate ranks to 235% by max ultimate rank. So your shield is 235% better at max ultimate rank while Overguard is active. That essentially makes you unkillable to anything that can be blocked by shields, right? Which is projectiles and melee attacks. It's not areas of effect. It essentially makes you unkillable to those. So reducing that kind of makes a little sense. Increasing this cooldown reduces the uptime you have on being unkillable. Kind of makes a little bit of sense, doesn't it? So this this only impacts ultimate ranks. This impacts every rank. So this has an effect in leveling, and an effect on builds that aren't, fully slotted with perfect gear or whatever. So this change I can see people making an argument against because it affects more than just the best in slot characters. The way I would do it, I would make the cooldown scale up with rank, probably in ultimate ranks. Make the cooldown scale up from whatever it was originally to this 20 seconds, or whatever you want to make it at max ultimate rank. That's how I would do it to make it. Yeah, it gets a little bit worse as you increase ultimate ranks, but you become more and more of a god. So, does it really matter? I don't know. Overdod definitely deserved a nerf. It's a little bit upsetting that the nerf affects non-best in slot characters, but I don't think this skill is by any means obsolete. It's still incredibly powerful. It's just the amount of uptime you have on that incredible power is a little bit less. Squad tactics, slightly increased percent all damage scaling at ultimate ranks. Too bad I have never had this leveled higher than 7 out of 12, since it was nerfed into the ground several patches ago. I have no idea what the ultimate ranks look like. I suspect I never will until the skill gets reworked. Demolitionist, Blast Shield, reduced damage absorption at ultimate ranks, and only at ultimate ranks, I want to be clear about that. 1750 by max ultimate rank. Increased cooldown to 14 seconds, it was 12 seconds, and reduced the health activation threshold to 60%, it was 70%. In testing, there was a lot of argument because the original version of this, if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to remember, because we've been testing different versions of this for a while, I believe they reduced the damage absorption at all ranks, and I argued against that, mostly for the reasons I just made with Overdod cooldown, in that, not everyone is going to have the ultimate ranks of Blast Shield, so reducing those ranks kind of affects people that don't need it to be reduced. But certainly at ultimate ranks, Blast Shield is too good. This is negligible. This is definitely noticeable, but with the amount of damage you take in Grim Dawn, having to take another 10% damage to activate Immortality doesn't really matter. It'll probably happen anyways. So I think this is not a... I mean, it's a change that you'll notice, but it won't... You'll notice it, but it won't have an impact on the way that you play, if that makes sense. Flame Touched, slightly increased Fire, Lightning, Burn damage scaling at ultimate ranks, added percent electrocute damage bonus. Pretty cool stuff. Temper, slightly increased percent physical pierce damage scaling at I can't talk, holy crap. Increased some physical pierce stuff, increased internal trauma stuff. High potency, increased damage modifier to 175%. This is the transmuter for Blackwater Cocktail. Reduced percent physical damage reduction to 18% for 2 seconds, requiring enemies to stand in the flame to maintain its effect for longer. I like this change a lot. I still think this sucks. As a damage skill, it sucks. As a debuff skill, I think this change is fine. It's definitely a nerf, but it's a deserved nerf. Searing Light, reduced chance of fumble and impaired aim to 33% by rank 10, 40% by max ultimate rank. It was previously 40% by rank 10, if I'm not mistaken, 45% by max ultimate rank. So it scales a little bit better in ultimate ranks per point invested, but it starts off worse and it reaches the previous rank 10 point. A deserved nerf because fumble and impaired aim are incredibly powerful forms of crowd control. I'm going to take another drink real quick. Alrighty. Occultist. Where am I? Aspect of the Guardian, slightly increased percent acid poison and vitality damage scaling at ultimate ranks, whatever. Bloody Parts significantly increased bleed damage scaling with rank, particularly at ultimate ranks, slightly increased spread interval. Cooldown reduced to 3 seconds. I don't even know why it has a cooldown, honestly. Wasting increased percent bleed damage scaling with rank. Black Death increased poison damage scaling with rank. Chance to confuse now scales. Blah, 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 blah. Now also increases the duration of Bloody Parts. That's interesting. That's pretty cool. Fevered Rage. Reduced percent offensive ability. Bonus for enemies to 25%. So it's a buff to Fevered Rage in single player. It's a nerf to Fevered Rage in multiplayer. Which is pretty cool. For people that don't know what I'm referring to, in multiplayer, if you have PvP enabled, you can cast Fevered Rage on a player, giving them a crap ton of offensive ability and allowing them to just nuke down bosses like the Dickens. So that's a little bit less effective. But in single player, it's not so dangerous to use anymore, which is cool. Doombolt. Reduced energy cost and increased damage scaling with rank. Percent current life damage now scales with rank to 20 to 35% by rank 12, 25 to 45% by max ultimate rank. Doesn't matter, still sucks, mostly because everything that's worth using current life reduction is completely immune to it, so why bother? Hellfire, slightly increased percent Chaos Fire burn damage scaling at ultimate ranks. Still sucks in my opinion. Manipulations, slightly increased percent damage scaling at ultimate ranks, sure. Soleil's Witchfire, increased percent vitality damage scaling at ultimate ranks. Added percent vitality decay damage bonus. Cool, sure. Second Right, slightly increased percent chaos damage scaling at ultimate ranks. Storm Spirit, slightly increased percent elemental damage scaling at ultimate ranks. No one is ever going to take this into ultimate ranks. No one is ever going to put more than 1 point into this skill. So that change doesn't matter. These changes are cool, I guess. Nightblade. Nightblade. Anatomy of Murder. Increased percent bleed damage scaling at ultimate ranks. Added percent vitality and percent vitality decay damage bonuses. Because all of that none of that flat vitality decay damage in Nightblade needed to be buffed up. Yep. Circle of Slaughter, reduced chance to fumble to 35% by rank 12, 45% by max ultimate rank. Took a bad skill, made it worse. I like it. Elemental Awakening, slightly increased percent elemental fast burn damage scaling at ultimate ranks. Took a bad skill, made it better but left it bad. Merciless Repertoire, slightly increased percent acid, poison, cold, and frostburn damage scaling at ultimate ranks. Again, not a skill I foresee anyone ever going into ultimate ranks. Oh wait, no, that's not true, because they gave it flat poison damage last patch, which means poison witch hunters probably would want this in ultimate ranks, so it's slightly better for them. Sure. Phantasmal Blades, slightly increased pierce damage scaling with rank, which synergizes nicely with this increased pierce damage dealt as vitality to 60% frenetic throw. So that plus this means you get a lot more vitality damage out of frenetic throw. Heartseeker, reduced percent damage converted to health to 10% by rank 12, 12% by max ultimate rank. That has to be the lowest scaling I have ever seen for ultimate ranks. That's what, 0.2% that damage converted to health per ultimate rank. That is ungodly terrible. Nether Edge, slightly increased core damage scaling with rank. I still think this is a good change, for the record. I'm just kind of laughing at how terrible this scales. Nether Edge, slightly increased core damage scaling with rank. Sure, whatever. I keep doing that, I don't want to. Alright, Arcanist, Elemental Balance, slightly increased percent burn, fast burn, and electrocute damage scaling at ultimate ranks. Sure. Overload, slightly increased percent elemental damage dealing, particularly at ultimate ranks. It needs more than a slight buff, but sure, whatever. Fabric of Reality, increased percent Aether Chaos damage scaling, particularly at ultimate ranks. Sure. Yeah, okay, actually. I could see Fabric of Reality starting to become pretty good. Alexa's Flash Freeze, still amazing. Absolute Zero, slightly increased Frostburn damage, scaling at ranks 10+, particularly at ultimate ranks. Whatever. Sphere of Protection, penalty to physical damage removed. Total damage penalty can now be reduced to 0 by max ultimate rank. Thank goodness. Ah, finally. I've been waiting for this exact change for, I think, over a year now. Thank God, finally. Wrath of Adrivets, reduce cooldown to 5 seconds. Yeah, whatever, no one cares. It's a 12%, am I doing that math right? No, I'm not. What is 1/6? 17% something? Alright, it is a 17% better crowd control skill. It is still a terrible damage skill. Yay. Devouring Swarm. Reduce percent damage converted to health to 33% by rank 16, 45% by max ultimate rank. Sure. Still incredible. Emboldening Roar. Slightly increased percent all damage dealing at ultimate ranks. The skill needs far more than that. Heart of the Wild. Reduce percent health bonus to 30% by rank 10, 40% by max ultimate rank. Sure. Primal Strike. Slightly increased lightning damage dealing with rank. Did not need a buff. Torrent, slightly increased lightning damage dealing with rank, did not need a buff. Storm Surge, added electrocute damage bonus, needed far more of a buff. Alright, that's the patch. So what do I think? So shields got changed. That's one way to put it. Shields got nerfed, particularly Witchblades and no, just soldiers in general got nerfed. Witchblades didn't get specifically nerfed, like Curse of Fealty, not nerfed. The offensive ability on Blood of Dread, not nerfed. Commandos didn't get specifically nerfed. The flat physical damage on Temper was not nerfed. The offensive ability on Flame Touched was not nerfed. The total speed on Vindictive Flame was not nerfed. All of the important things in Demolitionist and Occultist contributing to the power of those dual masteries were not nerfed. So Soldier, with respect to shields, was nerfed. I still think, and I said this last patch, when they were nerfed, I still think Witchblades and Commandos, particularly the one-handed plus shield variant, I still think they are going to remain dominant over the meta. I still think they're the most powerful way to build a character, even following this patch. I literally did the math and explained that I did this math. They lost 3% of their DPS, and they have a little bit less uptime on Overguard, and they can't use Blitz as often due to the Markovian's cooldown change, which Commandos were probably using Siegebreaker with Warborn anyways, so the Markovian change doesn't affect them. So they didn't really lose much. They didn't. They got nerfed, yes. They got nerfed a lot. Like, in terms of individual things that were adjusted, they got nerfed a lot. They didn't lose much. They are still very, very powerful. So, that's unchanged. I don't think... I've told this to people. They disagree with me. I don't think... And I would bet all of my 1150 something hours playing Grim Dawn, I don't think they're going to be bad. They should still be easily capable of soloing Gladiator Crucible, which is remarkable unto itself. There's talk that Blackwater Cocktail or some elemental build, I kind of forgot what, is more powerful than they are. maybe in terms of damage output, those builds are, which is absurd. In terms of survivability, not really. And that's something that shines with the Witchblades and the Commandos. They are incredible sources of damage that can't be killed. Or they can die if you're playing mindlessly. It's very hard to die with them if you're like trying not to die. And yet they have incredible damage. And that combination of potency, it's just too powerful for for one character to wield, right? So toning both aspects of that back, toning back the offensiveness and the defensiveness is something I am completely game for going in that direction. And I think this continues to try to do that. I don't think it succeeds in doing so. Being frank, I would be a lot more harsh on, if it were up to me, if I were making every change ever, in Cornucopia, in some mod or whatever, if I were balancing Grim Dawn, I would be a lot more harsh on Witchblades and Commandos than Crate has been. So, yeah, that's my opinion. I don't think the changes especially change anything about their functionality. And obviously, I've played with the patch, you guys haven't. Maybe when you guys get the patch, you'll have physical evidence to disagree with me with, playtime experience and stuff to disagree with me on. And I'm looking forward to that. If you do disagree with me, I would love to hear it. Having said that, there are elements of this patch that I really, really don't like. And I discussed them with Crate in the closed testing forums. And basically my problem with this patch and with the previous patch is there's this recurring trend of changes that seem to be slowing the game down. They don't have an impact on the strength of characters, so to speak. I mean, they do in some super meta way or some sort, but they don't make characters substantially worse. They just slow the characters down a little bit, and I don't like that. To highlight a couple changes in here, for instance, for which this is happening, the Mark of Divinity change increased cooldown on Steel Brought to 120 seconds. Mark of Divinity still amazing, still going to be picked in every single circumstance in which it was picked beforehand. It just slows the gameplay down. If you're relying on the Steel Brought, it's forcing you to play more cautiously, which to some extent is a good thing, because if you're relying on immortality, you shouldn't be. But if you're not relying on immortality and you're using this like I do, just as kind of a, oh shoot, whoops, I just took a crap ton of damage, good thing I have this and I can pop a potion now. If you're using it like that, which I am, it just kind of slows down gameplay by, in this case, 30 seconds. If we look at, what's the other one? This one, increased cooldown on Wave of Fire for Hellborn and Sash of the Immortal Sage. These were parts that were not overperforming. In fact, they were kind of weak. The cooldown went up. If I search increased cooldown, we have 7 instances for which the cooldown has been increased. One of these is Markovian's. No, Markovian's went down, didn't it? So we have 7 instances for which this is the case, and really all they serve to do is slow down gameplay in the long run. I just, this one is negligible on Blast Shield. This one, I already said why I don't like it, and it's not because of the slowing down gameplay point. So really, only these 5 I have a bit of an issue with, and there's other instances of this slowness that's kind of pervading through Grim Dawn at present. It's not. So when I wrote the feedback that I did to Trait, I made sure to clarify that the game isn't a slugfest. It's not incredibly boring and slow now, and it wouldn't be if these changes continued for another patch or another patch or another patch. But my worry in the long run is that if this is the direction that Grim Dawn wants to take, if they do want to slow the game down for some reason, if they do want to curb back the speed of players, which in turn means that enemies survive longer and effectively just become meat shields, which they could just give everything more health and accomplish the same task. If that's the direction Grim Dawn is going, I'm not really a fan. I honestly have no idea what the insight into this change is. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. If in the vacuum, this very minuscule change, I think it was like 1 second, now it's 1.5 seconds. This very minuscule change in a vacuum seems like inane to complain about. It's so small. Why am I complaining about this? It's this small thing that in conjunction with other things, in conjunction with the weapon damage reduction on a lot of devotions that didn't really need it. There are people that claim that it did, and I disagree with them, which, it's fine, that's the way discourse works. It's these changes all together over a long span of time that I'm worried about. And, it's tough for me to put the why of why I'm worried about this into words. I don't know, I don't want to see Grim Dawn to be too much slower than it is at present, and these changes, it's not so much that they curb back the offensiveness of players, it's that they make enemies seem tankier, even though they're not, simply because we kill them slower. And that's the way nerfs work. Of course, some nerfs to some characters are going to make those characters perform slower. That's fine. That's the way balance is handled. Some buffs make some characters kill faster. But when it's global things like percent weapon damage that apply to not just 1 or 2 characters, but to all characters that could possibly use percent weapon damage, which is all characters. I've used Blade Burst, I use Blind Fury all that much. I've used Bull Rush, I've used Maul on a character, each on a character for every damage type in the game. So there is a universality to these procs. When they're slowed down, when the cooldowns of seemingly various and not over-the-top procs are slowed down, when all of this comes together over the span of several patches, the game really starts to slow down. And that's not what I want to see happen. So that's kind of my issue with this patch. It's not that anything here is innately bad. It's not that the patch made the game worse. It's that the patch seems to be indicative of a trend that Trait is taking that I am not particularly in favor of. As a whole, I like this patch more than I like the previous one, meaning it's an improvement. It's definitely a good addition to the game. I hope I was explicit enough in my thoughts on, kind of the soldier thing, some of the other things. I didn't go into why... Where is it? Yeah, I didn't go into Acid Spray. I disliked this change not because it slows the game down or whatever, even though it does, not because it's a nerf, even though it is. I dislike this change because it's a nerf to something that was frequently used only because there's an absence of replacements for it. And that hasn't been solved. Maybe it will be in the future, but we're not presently in the future, we're in the now. Anyone previously using acid spray is going to continue to use acid spray, except, what is the one exception? There is an exception, I can't recall what it is. So, this change doesn't change anything about the way characters are made, it just makes every character worse, arbitrarily, for seemingly no good reason. And it's a pretty impactful change. It's a 17% change. Assuming I'm doing that math right, I have no idea. Actually, hold on. 1/6. Oh, I am amazing. Alright. So yeah, I don't really like this change. Again, not because of the slowness thing, not because of whatever, not because it's a nerf, but because it's a nerf to something for which there is no alternative, no viable alternative for many characters. So I don't really think this is a good thing. It's still just as important, it's still just as impactful. Well, no, it's not just as impactful. Just relative to everything else, given that other resist reductions were brought down, it's still just as impactful, but it didn't feel necessary, given the universality of which you can use this. Previously, it was 30, that's 25. I don't really like it. I'm still using it, because again, everyone's going to continue to use it. It just doesn't feel like a good change, I guess. I'm not upset about it. I just leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, I suppose. So yeah, as a whole, good patch, makes the game better as a whole. I am worried about the trend of changes we've been seeing, but for the individual changes, for the most part, evaluating this patch as a whole, very well done. A lot of these are great additions to the game, a lot of these are great additions to the game, a lot of these are great additions to the game. This is contentious, but I think it's a great addition to the game. I think this is a very, very good patch to tide people over before we dip our toes into the expansion in... I have no idea when the expansion releases, but whenever we do. So yeah, that was my patch analysis. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments of this video, or on the Grim Dawn forums, or on Steam, or on Reddit, or on the Grim Dawn Discord. I'm available a lot when I'm not asleep, which I'm going to go do now. So, take care everyone, I hope you enjoy this patch when it falls into your hands, and I hope to see you next time.